So far, we've covered a lot of ground. From the fall of the Roman Empire, through the Carolingian Renaissance, when music begins to be written down, and up through the school of Notre Dame, and all the way to mensural or Franconian notation. So far, that's a journey of about 800 years. As we prepare to move on to the fascinating developments of the 14th century, let's pause to enjoy some pop music. Who are the troubadours? To start to answer that, let's first turn to Chris.
So yes, who are the troubadours? Let's begin with a definition directly from Professor Fassler's book. Troubadours, poet-composers of monophonic songs of the 12th and 13th centuries, writing in the language of southern France, Old Occitan, also known as Provençal, especially on the topic of courtly love. There's a lot to unpack here. So to begin, let's first turn to Professor Dorsey Armstrong to help us understand the connection between the troubadours and courtly love.
When I teach, especially Arthurian literature of the 12th century, 11th and 12th centuries, I deal with the issue of courtly love. And when I explain it to my students, I explain it as a system by which a knight is driven to perform ever greater feats of glory because of his love for an unattainable woman. And the more beautiful and unattainable she is, the harder he will try to be an awesome knight and do great deeds. And as one of my students pointed out, this sounds like a big old waste of time, because does he ever get the girl? So a student of mine asked this, and the answer is theoretically no. Theoretically, courtly love is about an absolutely unattainable woman. And because she is unattainable, it is safe for a knight to declare his love for her, even if she's married to someone else, because everyone knows this is sort of a ritual. So troubadour poetry really comes to its apex and its moment of flourishing with Duke William IX of Occitan, who is known as the Troubadour Duke. And so the fact that you have a nobleman, and the most powerful nobleman in the south of France, writing troubadour poetry makes it very popular amongst all his followers and the citizens of Occitan. So that helps to promote the interest in it. And the south of France was much more liberal than the north. And so love poetry was something that was to be found throughout that area. Also, what's unusual is that in the south of France, not only do we have male troubadours who will take a subject matter and then try and form a song about it following very strict metrical guidelines, we also have the phenomenon known as the Trobairitz. And these are female troubadours, and we don't see them anywhere else. So for this brief period in the late 12th, early 13th century, we have the flourishing of a troubadour movement in the south of France. It includes men, it includes women, including the Contessa d'Adia, and it is one of the few instances where we have names of women attached to works of art like songs.
As we've heard from Professor Armstrong, this popular movement of poetry concerning courtly love flourished in the south of France during the late 12th and early 13th centuries. In the courts of southern France at the time, the popularity of these ideas was very much a fashion, as much as clothing and song, that explored love, for the first time in a long time in Western literary traditions, as a sexual force. The poems and songs of the troubadours explore love not only as divine love, and as an expression of humankind's relationship with God, but also as courtly love, and even as sexual desire. These complexities of love became popular partly because of increased study of ancient literature, particularly the Roman poet Ovid, whose Ars Amatoria, or The Art of Love, written in the year 2 of the Common Era, was available in fragments from at least the 11th century and was even included in the syllabi of medieval schools. The work is a charming and witty poetic manual for how to find and seduce a woman, and ultimately in Book 3, for how women can play the game as well. As Ovid and other fashions shaped the literary tradition in 12th century southern France, women were very much part of the poetic tradition, as subjects in the poetry, as patrons of the poets, and even as poets themselves, called Trobairitz, in contrast with the male Troubadours. As we have noted, the Troubadours and Trobairitz flourished in southern France. That region was known as Occitania, and the poets wrote in the native vernacular language of Occitan. These names derived from the language itself, so specifically from the word for yes. In the north of France, yes was spoken as ouil, which later evolved into the modern French word for yes, oui. In the south, yes was pronounced oc, which is reflected in the name of the region and the language. This map offers us a moment to visualize the boundaries of Occitania and to see place names rendered in the Occitan language. The land is, of course, still a beautiful corner of the earth, primarily encompassing the French Mediterranean between the Pyrenees and the Alps, as far north as the Loire, and including the modern realm of Bordeaux in the region of Occitan. The language of the region, known as Occitan or Provençal, descends from Latin. It was first known to be written down in the 10th century, and though some hundreds of thousands today still speak dialects of Occitan in portions of modern Spain, southern France, and northern and even southern Italy, the languages of Occitan are considered endangered. The language and poetry of the Troubadours, however, lives on in these songs, and it had significant influence on later poets and musicians. Keep these poet-composers, their language, and their geography in mind, as they will be important later in the course when we talk about Dante. For now, let's start to find out how the Troubadours, from this beautiful part of the world, crafted haunting songs in their beautiful language to explore the profound, perennial, sometimes humorous, complex, and mysterious powers of love.
So how do the ideas and values of courtly love get expressed in song? We have a couple wonderful examples out of a rich repertory to explore with you. A Chantar was written by Beatrice, the Contessa de Dia. It is the only surviving musical work by a Trobairitz, a female troubadour. In this song, the Contessa is a betrayed lover, but indignant, and she retains her sense of pride. Let's listen.
Chantar trop d'orgueil engrandant mein tas chest.
Wasn't that beautiful and moving? And doesn't this music sound more like our own? Whereas the chant and organa we've heard seem like they belong almost to an alien culture. That was Hannah the Priest playing the role of the Contessa, by the way. The performance of secular music has many, many problems associated with it because so little was actually written down and there is no indication as how to accompany it, save for a few prose descriptions and perhaps most importantly, through paintings or iconography. It seems clear that unless it was for a grand festive occasion, a song like A Chantar would be accompanied by a single plucked instrument such as the lute. We have one final piece for this episode, an alba. An alba is, as Dr. Fassler defines it, quote, a dawn song in the Troubadour and Trobairitz repertories. Usually, the singer takes on the role of a watchman who announces daybreak to a pair of illicit lovers, end quote.
So this particular beautiful alba, which is written by Giraud, who is flourished in the second half of the 12th century, is an alba. It's a dawn song. And some people think actually that it plays upon the hymn tune Ave Maris Stella. And if that's true, that would be a kind of ironic joke because, you know, hail, a hymn song that's about the stars, star of the sea and the nighttime. And then he brings his message. And he's talking about his companion who's making love to a woman inside this room, and he has to wake him up and tell him to flee. And he says, "Fine companion, whether you sleep or wake, sleep no longer, but softly rouse yourself, for in the east I see the star arisen, which brings the day. I have indeed recognized it, and soon it will be dawn." And the poem is very beautiful, and the music too, because there's a refrain. And many chansons, Troubadour and Trouvairitz in the north in the 13th century, Troubadour in the south in the 12th, have refrains. And the way the refrains work in the poetry and in the music is one of the things that characterizes particular genres of song in this period. So here you see a very simple example of refrain. And the refrain is, "And soon it will be dawn." So every strophe of the poetry ends with, "And soon it will be dawn. And soon it will be dawn," until the very last strophe, when he sings as a poet who has his own relationship as a friend to the man who's making love to the woman in the room. And he's kind of jealous, and he said, "Look, I'm out here, freezing my whatever off. You're inside. You're despising me because I'm telling you to wake up and get out." And so he changes the refrain for the last strophe, which reads, "Fair companion, I'm so rich in a dwelling that I would it were never dawn or day, for the noblest lady ever born of mother I hold in embrace." So in other words, he's faithful to the Virgin Mary, whatever this other guy is doing. "Therefore I heed not at all the jealous fool or the dawn." So he ends up with a kind of to the whole process of what he's been going through as the singer of a dawn song. So there are lots of things you can see in this poetry and in this music. The beauty, the possible intertextual relationship, intermusical relationship with Ave Maris Stella, the use of refrain, and a genre which gets twisted slightly to make new meanings in the music and in the poetry itself.
Bella Voce's Vince Wallace plays the watchman, while Eric Miranda plays the illicit lover. He is comfortable and reluctant to leave before getting caught. Let's listen to Res Glorios.
Res glorios, verais limbs eclardats, Deus puderos, Seigneur, si a vos plac. Al meu compagn, si as visels eira, che in lovi nos la noc fovenghida, et ad serra l'alba. El compagno si dormet oveliat, non dormats plus, si vos residats, che in orient velestel al cregida, camen al giorn, che ille ven connogida, et ad serra Del compagno in Occitan vos appel, non dormats plus, che io cantar lautsel, che vai querem lo giunter lo boscace, et hai paur che l'elgilus vos assace, ed ad essere Bellus compagn, tan sui Henric sogiun, che uno volgram ais fos albani giun. Car la gensor che anc nasces de maire, Denket abras, perché non presigaire, lo fulgilus ni l'alba.
Our lutenist, Brandon Aker, played a completely improvised accompaniment that was developed with the aid of our friends from the Newberry Consort, Ellen Hargis and David Douglas. So far, we've made it through about 900 years of medieval music history, and we've experienced the accomplishments of Ars Antiqua and the School of Notre Dame, as well as these earthly pleasures of the Troubadours and Trobairitz. In the next chapter of our story, we're going to encounter a century of crisis and all of the beautiful arts, musical, literary, and visual, that arose from that turbulence. See you next time.